So I am Regina Birdsell. I'm here at the Center for Nonprofit Management with some of my colleagues that have been working on the nonprofit resiliency effort for a couple of years now, actually 2 years to be specific. So our goal today is to walk through some of the opportunities that are coming up for contracting and grants, and based on your feedback, what the county's been doing to try and make it easier to navigate, to learn some of the work that the county's taking on with a new effort around equity and racial justice. And then we want to get some feedback from you on some of the work that we've been doing around the equity and county contracting work, to make sure that as we try to represent what matters most to you, that we're on track, that we didn't miss anything, and hopefully invite you to be part of it if you're interested. So there's plenty for everybody to do right now, in addition to the work that is your day job. But because this crosses over our entire sector and the kind of essential business model that we all work within, we really think this is important and timely. So I wanted to ask a question. So Anna, if you can put up the poll. We were curious to find out how many of you have ever contracted with the county. So this is an easy one. This is a yes or a no.
Hi, I'm sorry, did you say anything? When I first entered, I couldn't hear you.
Well, that could be lucky, but yes, I did.
Okay, hi.
Hi, Hazel. So good to see everyone. So yes, if you can just weigh in on the poll about yes or no, has your organization ever contracted with the county?
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so many of you are experienced, which is very exciting. Thanks, Anna. So we've got almost 3/4 that have, and about a fourth of you that haven't. So we'll pull down that. So I want to introduce you to a colleague of ours who I'm so grateful has been part of this journey for the last 2 years. You guys should know that in the world of the county, procurement is what we would call contracting. And Michael O has been a partner throughout in thinking about where there are opportunities to improve on some of the issues that you all said mattered most. So Michael, number one, is smart. Number two is nice. Number three, listens. And so we thought we'd start with some of the changes that they've been making based on the feedback that you provided and that we've been pushing on. And also some of the opportunities that are coming up and how to find them. So Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Regina. And I am going to require that you come introduce me at every function, professional or otherwise, just so that, even at family events,
yeah, my
mom will be happy. Let's see. Am I sharing my screen yet? I don't think I am. Here we go. There we go. Are you guys able to see that?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much. And Regina, I also thank you so much for allowing me to go before Dr. Scorza, because I do not want to be the guy who follows Dr. Scorza. If you've ever seen him in action, he is amazing. So you guys are in for a treat. As Regina mentioned, I am the Chief Deputy Director for the Internal Services Department. We are actually the purchasing agent for the county, and I'm going to explain what that means very soon. But my experience has been very much steeped in government and specifically municipal procurement. I am the former Chief Procurement Officer for the City of LA under Mayor Garcetti, and the former Chief Procurement Officer for the City of New York under Mayor de Blasio, but I also worked under Mayor Bloomberg in various capacities, where the vast majority of my experience was actually in human service contracting, believe it or not. So I hope this will be very informational and fun for you guys to learn. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about what we're looking to do, right? We just want to bring LA County procurement into the 21st century. I wish I could say we were going to bring it into the 22nd century, but I don't think we're going to, I want to be realistic about what we're trying to do here. Background. You guys, 70% of you have done contract with the county. Did you know that you're probably part of this 86 percentile, the big yellow part? That is all done through the departments. Each department manages their own contracting. In the county, you call service contracting, which is what you do, as contracts, and you call the contracting for commodities, for like pens and furniture and equipment, purchasing. And that's why we are the purchasing agent, because that process is actually centralized through it's not completely centralized, but big portions are centralized. And that's only 14% of the spend. When you're an entity this big and you allow 86% of your spend to be completely decentralized, federated, and customized to however each department wants to manage it, I can only imagine what your experiences have been like, the 70-some% of you who've tried to get contracts, and the 20% or so of you who've probably wanted to get contracts, right? But not a lot of people know this. A lot of people come up to me and say, hey, well, even departments who manage their own contracts will come to me and say, hey, how do I do this? And are you going to let me do it? And I say, I have nothing to do with what you do, right? And so it's a very interesting dynamic at play. But what does procurement actually mean, right? So procurement is actually, there's a number of different functions within what we call procurement, right? There's vendor management. That means like things like, creating an account, right, to get into the system, doing responsibility checks, like background checks, all the document management that you as the contractor community have to do because of the things that we require. And by the way, all these things that I'm talking about, it's the same whether you're contracting with Disney, Netflix, Sony, whoever, or us, or government, right? This is all things that everyone else does. Procurement is one of those things that everyone else, private or public, does. They may do it a little bit differently, but they do it. Sourcing and requisition, what does that mean? That's the RFP process for you guys, right? We do bids. We do all that stuff that gets you towards contract. That's what it is. Requisition is after you get the contract, how do I actually request that I get the thing, right? Like I have a contract for pens. How do I get the contract? That's a requisition, right? All of these things are very embedded into this sophisticated life cycle of functionality. Contracting, once you award, can we lock that contract? Can we negotiate, get it done? Also, can we manage that contract? Since now we have these deliverables or these outcomes that we're tracking, can we manage it? Invoice and payment. Like people think if this is different for some reason, but it's the same, right? Like all of these things, invoice to pay is connected to the RFP because you're paying for that thing that you just sourced, right? And so these are things that people don't realize. And I don't know why there's a red mark here. I apologize for that. But this slide shows you how much of this is actually automated or at least captured in a enterprise system in the county. And you can see in contract, where a lot of you guys are, none. For the sourcing and requisition, for the pieces that we handle here at ISD, there is some automation in the sourcing process. What do I mean by sourcing? If we put out a bid for like pens and things like that, we actually do it online and we request those bids through a system. So we capture all of that from front, all the way from the beginning to at least the issuance of a purchase order, which is basically a contract. We capture that. So we kind of capture the first sort of elements of that. We don't capture invoice to pay in system. It's kind of partial, right? And so with contracts, there are departments that are capturing like the payment side, but that's all done through our ERP, but very contract specific and based on encumbrances. And so I know this sounds like super complicated, and it is, because what's happening is you have a contract that's offline, someone's desk or in a file cabinet. Someone sends an invoice to me. I look at the invoice, I match it up against the contract. I say, I got the services. I then send that over to someone else who cross-checks it and says, oh, we have the funds, and that fund in our system, that encumbrance that was created, that account that was created has money to pay this. And then that's how you get paid, right? But for you guys, what's happening is that first level review is almost like a pre-audit before you even get to that second level review of is the money there. So I can only imagine how complicated it is. And I can actually imagine it because I've done it. So I just want to talk a little bit about the improvement initiatives that we've been working on, right? And Dr. Scores is probably going to touch on this a little bit more. This is a full list. I don't want to go through all the lists. I highlighted just quickly because we're talking about opportunities. There is a site, if you have not been there, and I meant to put it into the chat. And Anna, I don't know if you have the ability to drop that CEO site into the chat. I'll do it later if you can't do it right now. But this is actually a screenshot of the site. And if you go there today, and if some of you have already been there, you can actually see the opportunities on this site. That data is the same data you're going to find on our doing business site. However, it is customized for you. It only includes ARPA and CFCI opportunities. And we did that because Dr. Scorza came to us and said, hey, we need to make sure that we have one place to go for everybody who's going to be engaging in these opportunities. And we were debating a lot of design ideas, and we said, you know what, we can create this widget that will capture all of this automatically. I mean, there's a little bit of manual data entry for the departments to do, but for you, it will be a very easy place to go to see all these opportunities. Then you can click on it and then open it up and find all the details. That is just one example where we are hearing you, and we want to engage with you so that we can actually make things simple and try to deploy those simple solutions as quickly as possible. And I'm not going to lie, some of these things that sound simple are not always simple, and they're not always quickly deployable. And so, we will be honest with you about that as well. The other item on that website that I really want to, here are the links right here. So you can click on these. But when you go on that site, if you scroll to the bottom, one of the things that you will find is that contracting definitions and terms. Why is that important? Well, actually, in this meeting, I think Elizabeth is on the call, and during one of our work group meetings in the ECC, it came up that hey, you guys have this great dictionary of terms on your doing business website, but it's super hidden, right? And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I went back and looked at it again, and I realized that, because we wanted to be cool, I guess, the tech deployment of it is kind of hidden through a number of clicks. And so what we did was we actually just took it all, put it on one page, easily accessible. I know it's a PDF, but it's still just one page where you can find all those terms. And then Dr. Scores' team made it look pretty, because I can't make anything look pretty. And then they put it there for you to find, right? And we will be updating that as we go through. But that's another example where we heard a suggestion that we knew could be deployed quickly. And I think we did this in a matter of weeks, in the midst of the same team working on this, responding to Omicron. So where we can, let's move quickly. That's one of the themes that I want to share with you. The other one that I want to highlight today is the e-procurement system that we have been working on as an initiative, and is actually in process today in terms of the solicitation. The solicitation was released on May 27th of last year. It is in evaluation now. We received 7 proposals. I can't tell you more than that. I can't tell you which companies proposed. I can't tell you how much money is going to be involved. We know estimate-wise what it will be, because they proposed the dollar values. I can tell you though that the companies that did propose are leaders in the strategic sourcing e-procurement space. And so we are very confident that this will end up in a successful implementation once we get into contract. We anticipate the contract to be, the evaluation to be completed within the next few weeks, and then we will do a very deep dive into the technologies themselves, and hopefully get into contract by summer. And then our goal is, knock on wood, like boots on the ground doing implementation by late summer, early fall. And why am I telling you all this? Because I think you probably can gather that speed, right? The user experience for both you and the departments and the oversights, right? That's the other thing that people don't always think about. Like for the board offices, for the CEO, for the auditor controller, they want to see things in real time so that they don't have to keep asking for things, right? And that's sometimes what slows you down in your sort of your day-to-day practice that you don't even think about as you're going through it. We really want to make it as inclusive as possible. So we really want the small local community grassroots organizations to be able to get into the county's business portfolio, greater transparency, visibility, collaborations, and then, you know, like we always want to save money where we can. But I think here it's really thinking about cost avoidance. That dollar you don't have to spend on meeting our administrative requirements is a dollar that you can redeploy to the community, just like the same thing for us, right? So I want to just go through very quickly a case study, because I did this in New York, right? And I talk about New York a lot. And so people get really sick of me here because I'm always talking about New York. But this is just one example of one workflow that we created prior to any technology being implemented of one RFP, right? These are the number of boxes, number of tasks. These swim lanes are the number of organizations involved. And you know, you see a lot of diamonds in there, a lot of decisions by various people. As you can see, some of these workflow elements are parallel, some of them are sequential. Everything was done sequentially though, right? Because when you don't have technology to enable some of this stuff, like you're just not capable of doing it. Why is this important? Because you have to know the business now, what you do today, in order to impact change and make the changes that are going to actually make a difference for people. And this was not in place in LA County when I got here. We have a few more workflows now, but this is the kind of work that we have to do before you deploy. Now, what do we do in New York? Well, we had a bunch of documents that we would require from our vendors, right? And so in New York, you have this local law that says you have to have disclosures from the companies that want to do business with the city of New York, and there's a minimum of 4. The one is a business disclosure, and then each of the principals or officers have to disclose. Actually, one of my last tasks before leaving New York was being on the phone with Jeff Bezos' lawyers to go through his real estate holdings, because his lawyers were saying, do you know how long this form's going to be if I have to list all of his real estate holdings? And so we were fighting about that before I left. But now all of that, and then what would happen is, you know, Jeff Bezos would send us that package, right? It would be like a red well or like some envelope, like huge 15-pound package. And then we'd have 20 data entry specialists enter that into a internal system, internal database, so that departments can just say, okay, we have the information. They're not even doing any like real substantive assessment. That right here, it says a month. Some took, like you can imagine, the Amazon one took like months, right, to do. When we implemented this piece, just automating that collection, making it self-service, giving very easy user interface, a very easy user interface so people can see where they were in the process, it went down to 1 day. Our first vendor that logged on and entered their information was a daycare center in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, who had never called our office before. And they got through it in 2 hours, right? This part, 7 weeks, is actually the business responsibility piece, the integrity check that New York City departments are required to do. It was very specific and it was very formalized, and it required, I believe, 4 departments being in the process. We actually we didn't change that process because it was very important, right? You want to be able to do business with responsible vendors. However, we changed the workflow so that everything was parallel, and then we also made it visible. So this last part here, you can kind of see, like we made it visible so that you can see where things were. All the green boxes are people who said yes, ready to go. And then, you know, the ones where they don't, like, you know exactly where it's at. You'd be really surprised to see how fast people act when everyone else can see how slow you're being. And that brought that process, again, 7 weeks. Some took much longer, down to 7 days, right? And we could track everything to that level. This is the experience. I mean, this is more on the department side, but this is what I was talking about. You lock that contract for office supplies, then you make it almost like this like shopping experience for the county departments, instead of having this like paper heavy, process heavy experience, because you can actually track that and can put all your controls on the back end. So the controls are built into the process. Then you don't have to ask, you don't have all these people asking questions, because you already asked and answered them. Only people who are, you can only buy things that you're allowed to buy. It won't let you pay for anything that you don't have money for. It won't let people who aren't eligible to buy stuff, right? And so that's kind of the value of standardizing under the system. This is an RFP, right? This is just a screen that shows you what happens when you're in RFP. Well, it tells you, hey, this is your RFP. This is a competition pool or category that you're competing for in that RFP on this side. And then here you're like, oh, well, I've only completed this part. Or when you evaluate, the evaluator's like, hey, are you going to give them 35 points or 40 points? All of this is like very visible. So you're not losing, you can kind of clearly and transparently see what is happening at any given time. That's a principle that you have to build into your design process, right? And that's what we are focusing on. Here, this is a vendor profile. So right now, what happens if you have contracts with DMH, with DPH, with DHS, you are going through 3 different systems, right? I'm not even talking about technology. I'm just talking about process systems, right? Whatever DHS requires, you have to deal with that. Whatever DMH requires, you have to deal with that. And whatever DPH requires, you have to deal with that. By the way, they're one health agency, so I picked that example on purpose. If you're going through like DCFS, I'm sure it's another one, right? But here, what the concept is when you build this out and you design this, each business has its own profile. You are not catering to one department. You're creating your profile with the documents required so that everyone can see it. And you get to decide what you're going to share and what not to share. You can use it as your own, like, you know, like a bank, right? It could be your bank account, and you could decide how you're going to deploy that. But what it allows is the departments don't ask you offline or create some other process to ask you. They just go through the system and they already see it right there. This is more about like creating a contract. And again, I would hazard a guess that most people are just copying and pasting, right? Like old contracts and then trying to update those. What this does is actually allow you to create a repository of contract provisions that you can actually insert into the right contracts, so that the lawyers don't have to look at it again because they've already approved these provisions. So the idea is everyone gets like you've already approved these provisions for this type of contract for human services. Let's say you're providing homeless services. This is the model. If you're adding another provision that's not in the model, then what it does is it kicks off a workflow for the lawyers to review and say, hey, I need, this is a problem, or I'll approve this as well. And so it creates an automated workflow based on what's substantively in the contract. You can sign with DocuSign, right? Don't even get me started. Under California and state law, you can do e-signatures. We actually put a policy together for the board policies that says you can do e-signatures. So people should be allowing that already. But the cool thing is when you do the implementation of this kind of system correctly, you can sign from anywhere, right? And that goes for tasks too. This is just more about like all the workflows. Like you can see exactly where you are in the system. You see in the workflow where you are. You see the people who have your stuff. You know, so there's no like hiding. There's no like throw it over the fence and then a black box, right? It's all transparency. It's accountability, and actually, again, that transparency alone will just speed things up. This slide is about the reporting, right? So when you do it right, you're not relying on surveys. You're not relying on sort of like, you know, a lot of manual sort of articulation of that data. What you're what you can do is have this be automated and in real time report on things like, okay, how many proposals did you receive? How many RFPs did you release? What's the average invoice cycle time? Right? This is cycle time to pay. So this department, this was one of my old departments that I used to work at. I used to be the general counsel of the Department of Youth and Community Development. They're at 3.56 days from receiving an invoice and approving an invoice. 3.56 days. I will tell you, when I was general counsel, it was weeks, right? And not because of, it wasn't my fault, I promise. It was that we didn't have a system that would allow us to do automated three-way match, right? We were doing a lot of pre-audit activities to do that. And so, you know, when you see this and when you're able to do that, it really transforms the experience for everybody, right? It doesn't become like procurement, when you think about it, should be an enabler of the services that we want to provide to our residents, right? To our constituents. It should not be a barrier to that. It should be an enabler. And that's what it allows us, when you do this right, that's what that allows us to do. I just want to placeholder slide in case there are any questions, but really we do want to get strategic. We want to get faster. We want to get smarter. We really want to help you. We want to listen to you. And so I will pause there because I feel like I've been talking for a long time. All right. And I have to figure out how to stop sharing. There we go.
Michael, it seems like one of the takeaways is that other municipalities, and one large one that you came from, were able to tackle some of these kind of user experience issues that we're hoping to address in LA County. You know, I think one of the things that occurred to me for this audience is it clear from your experience that as we make it easier to find out what contracts are up, then the next phase is how to apply. And that's where technology can help both with sort of storing information and documents and hopefully eliminating some of the redundancy that we heard from some organizations about how often do I have to provide my 990 and my board report and, you know, all that stuff. Because there's a place where this begins and ends, like where your responsibility begins and ends, right?
Yeah. And I think, and I believe I'm going to answer your question, but if I don't, you know, ping me, Regina, and keep me honest. But I think if you don't think about this and treat this whole process as a life cycle, as all of the various functions that I talked about, then you will not solve that problem. So what do I mean by that? Like if you solve the document problem that you're talking about, right? Like we can definitely create a document vault. We can create like a business profile and people can ping into that. And then we can tell departments, hey, the latest and greatest document, all that information will be here. And you should go in there and check that instead of continuously pinging the department, the CBOs for that information. We can do that. And that solves that one problem. But it's not going to solve, like you said, the RFP proposal problem. And we could solve the RFP proposal. We could put it online. Actually, there are some products out there that handle just that piece, where you can actually you can release a RFP, you can receive proposals, you can evaluate them, score them, and then you can award, and then it stops there. You can do that. And that'll solve like a lot of your problems. But then it doesn't solve your payment problems, right? Because then your invoice, what are you going to do? You're going to log into another system or do it on paper still. And whereas if you had the whole thing sort of connected, what happens is you have your vendor profile. Use that vendor profile with all the documents to keep track of all of your contracts, to keep track of all the proposals that you've actually submitted. And then when you submit, the RFP comes out, you submit it. If you're successful, you flip that submission or whatever budget you submitted with that into the contract. The contract flips to a purchase order / payment vehicle, which then flips to your invoice. You will not be able to invoice for anything that's not in the contract. So then what are the departments even reviewing, right? They don't, it's all automated because you built in that control. And so you can really quickly just do the substantive thinking work and then release the payment.
Yeah, it seems like it sure provides for opportunities for the county side also to have data about what their money is doing.
100%.
In my simple
100%.
mind. I'm
There's
curious.
there's so much data there, and I mean it exists today. I don't want to say that it doesn't exist in the county, but it's not aggregated and it's not easily usable data, and that's what I think is going to be key.
One of the things that we've definitely seen from your ISD team, Michael, is you guys have listened to what the nonprofits said about this process and where the pain points were. And we really appreciate that you guys have put the time in to move this ball down the field. There's a couple minutes for any questions that you guys have regarding the stuff that Michael just covered. I don't want to cut anybody off. You know, at the core of this, we wanted to talk about access and making it easier to be searchable and to make it more efficient to apply and to get rid of some of the jargon and all those things that you all said were big barriers. That's not even getting into insurance and evaluation and all the other things that are involved and payment delays and all of that. But kind of at the front end, that first piece, we really appreciate that Michael's team has been digging in with us on this. So thanks, Michael.
Yeah, no problem. And you know, we're again focusing on the quick wins if we can. And if you guys have additional feedback, I know the process is here to surface those, and we'd love to hear about that. And then I should also manage expectations. This is a multi-year effort, right? To do this. This is not easy. All of the departments right now, right, do their own thing on the contracting side. So it is going to take work. And so it's not like we award the contract and tomorrow we can do it. So I just want to make sure that I'm managing your expectations.
Thanks for that reminder, Michael. And you guys should notice that Kathy Hanks and Emmy and Jason are trying to move government at lightning speed for government. So we appreciate the culture clash, because there's certainly, we've been doing our best to be very annoying to push them to move faster. So, but thanks, Michael, appreciate that. So one of the things that emerged over the last 2 years is a new effort that Dr. Scores is going to talk about. He is the executive director of racial equity for LA County, focusing on anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion. And part of that is about contracting and getting a better representation of organizations working in communities that have been left behind for so long. So D'Artagnan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Regina. And Michael was talking about how he didn't want to go after me. Now I feel like
pressure's on.
The pressure's on. He brought the fire for you all. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's incredible to see so many of my colleagues, both here in the county and also in the nonprofit sector and in other spaces that I've been in. I am so grateful to see so many smiling faces. And I'm really happy to be here with you all to talk about what we're doing in ARP and how, in many ways, you have an opportunity to take advantage of both the resources, but also the either grant and or contracting opportunities that are coming down the pike. And so I'm going to start by sharing my screen here and open up with this, with a brief overview of our work. And so today, I'm gonna talk about the work that we're doing here in ARDI. I'm also going to talk about how ARP itself allows for and focuses on an equitable distribution of the funds that the federal government has given us provided for us to support a stronger recovery. And then we'll talk about ARP grant and contracting opportunities. A little bit of that is going to be repetitive because Michael pretty much went over it for you all, but I'm just going to direct your attention to some of the things that he's already shared, but lift up a few points that I want to make sure that connect to what it is that we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll provide an opportunity for Q&A. So, I always start meetings with a land acknowledgement, because land acknowledgements are simple and powerful ways of showing respect. They offer us a step towards correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous people's history and culture, and they invite us to honor the truth. So today, I recognize and acknowledge the first people of this ancestral and unceded territory, the land that we call Los Angeles County. With respect to their elders, past and present, I recognize the Gabrielino Tongva, the Fernandino Tatavium, and the Venturino Chumash as the original stewards of this land, and as those whom we must continue to lift up along with their stories and culture. So let's talk about ARP and what ARP is, and in some ways what it is not, right? So many of you know that the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 was created, and it developed the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds program to deliver much needed aid to support response to the COVID-19 pandemic. First, to bring the pandemic under control, to replace lost revenue so we can maintain vital public services and jobs, to support an equitable recovery through the stabilization of households and businesses, and then to address systemic public health and economic challenges that contributed to the inequitable impact of the pandemic upon communities. ARP specifically focuses on and centers on incorporating equity. And so what's important to note is that Treasury's guidelines have very intentional requirements that call upon our municipal agencies and recipients of American Rescue Plan Act dollars to talk about and articulate how they're going to focus on equity in the distribution of their funds. It also requires that we have things like, community engagement plan, that we center workers, and that there be either an evidence-based intervention that's being utilized and invested in, or an evaluation that our departments are able to use and our agencies are able to use to determine efficacy in their programming. In addition to that, our board adopted a motion on July 13th in 2021 that calls upon us in the county to strategically utilize these funds to benefit communities that are most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And what they called upon us to do in CEO and ARTI is to develop a set of equity principles, as well as a proposed formula that all departments must apply to their ARP funding requests, a public-facing website with a dashboard that reports on the county's ARP expenditures and outcomes by program and department, and a public-facing dashboard identifying ARPA contracting opportunities, which you got to see Michael talk about briefly, at least on the website itself, and subsequently an implementation plan to capture data for non-geographically concentrated communities that are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. These are the communities that are often invisible, communities that we don't have data for. It could be Asian Americans who are in residential service motels in Elysian Park, or Native American, Indian populations that are not concentrated in a specific neighborhood or in a census tract. This could be, small businesses, immigrant-owned businesses in Torrance, where you wouldn't think that there would be impact, but there is, right? Because they were negatively impacted by the pandemic. So it's helping us understand and think about how we can target our programs and resources to best address the needs of these populations. So in moving this work forward, the board approved a set of equity guiding principles that ARTI proposed that really help us focus on understanding whether or not the thing we're doing is the right thing to do and whether or not we're headed in the right direction. So equity principles are about, they are ways to help us guide our programming, the way we're designing our programs, the way we're carrying those programs out, and help inform departments' ability to align what they're doing with a focus on achieving equity. This is a good example of an equity guiding principle. So for example, you can see here, we're working to support the alignment of policies, practices, and procedures that address equity challenges throughout the county's workforce, and that includes personnel, contractors, and vendors. So it's not just about what we're doing internally for our staff, but it's also about how we interact with and engage with our subrecipients and subcontractors, as well as any vendor who helps to carry out the work that we're doing here in the county in partnership. Additionally, we set a set of principles. We developed a set of principles to align ARP specific projects and ARP specific funds with the intended outcomes we're seeking to achieve. And so, for example, we want to make sure that the programs that are being provided through ARP prioritize those resources and services and geographies that are most impacted by the pandemic. We're utilizing and have developed what has now become an award-winning platform. I want to thank Michael and his team over at ISD for their incredible work. We just got notified today. I'm going to show it to you all today. We just got notified about an award that this effort has received to help map data through our Equity Explorer. And what we're trying to do is help support business decisions, right? Help departments understand how they can best target their resources to address the need. So think about it this way. Let's say our Department of Public Works wants to put bike lanes in a community where there are no bike lanes. We want them to be able to have the data and demonstrate where those bike lanes are. And then they can plan to put bike lanes in communities where, one, there may not be bike infrastructure, while we are simultaneously working on decriminalizing bike mobility. So for example, if you grew up in South LA like I did, and you were riding around in the neighborhood, and you're riding on the opposite side of the street because you're in a really narrow neighborhood, like I grew up in both Watts and Inglewood, right? You're riding on the opposite side of the street so you can see cars coming in front of you because you're worried about a car coming behind you, right? There's no bike infrastructure in the neighborhood, right? We want to decriminalize mobility, decriminalize your ability to ride your bike to get to and from school or to and from work, while simultaneously making strategic investments so that we can improve safety in biking in that neighborhood, right? So it's really thinking strategically about how we align resources with the need in communities. This is the example of the dashboard that has been created, again, in partnership with ISD and their incredible team there. This dashboard increases transparency. It allows you all to see exactly where those dollars are being spent. It also helps us understand how those dollars are being spent and aligned with our equity funding formula that the board has also approved. That formula calls upon departments to spend 40% of their funds in the communities that are most impacted by the pandemic, to spend 35% of their funds in the next tier of communities that are most impacted by the pandemic, 20%, 3%, and 2% respectively in the moderate, low, and lowest tiers. And it also allows us to show what the project funding allocation amounts are and what the design elements are, so that if you have a question about that project and you want to know about the goals of that project or what the intended outcomes are for that project, you're able to see that. It's publicly available. What we've also been able to do is develop a set of our project maps. So you can now see the specific geographies and or locations where these services are being provided or where they're being targeted to be provided. So when data comes in from departments, we'll be able to further pinpoint the exact locations or the census tracts where, for example, we are targeting resources based upon need. So you'll be able to see, as you can view here on the screen, the darker the purple, the more likely that the need is for that particular community. And we are able to overlay the specific project that is, the specific project based upon what the department has designed with the neighborhood or the geography of need. So how does all of this translate into, our grant and contracting opportunities? So one of the things that CEO has done is it's worked to streamline competitive procurement and the contracting process. We revised the process in partnership with County Council, in consultation with County Council, from a 4 to 10 month process to a 2 to 3 month process. And what that's allowing departments to do is to simplify their solicitation and their contracting documents. Certainly taking into consideration the risk that that comes with distributing funds as a public agency, as a public entity. So for example, still requiring liability insurance, still requiring, still having requirements that ensure that we mitigate risk associated with contracting and or the distribution of these solicitation opportunities. But what we're also making sure that we do, as you saw with Michael, is we've centralized a lot of this information in an ARP website. We've developed an online interest form with areas of interest. So if, for example, you would like to pursue an opportunity related to, community engagement or outreach, this centralized ARP website will allow you to submit your information. And then when a solicitation comes out, you'll receive that solicitation. Or if a department puts out a request for, a program administrator, or puts out a request for, services related to data or whatnot, the centralized website will allow you to access those solicitations so that you can sign up, as Michael pointed out again earlier. What we're also doing is we're launching an outreach effort, and this is part of what we're doing with a number of CBOs and chambers of commerce across the county and the region, is we're informing them about these contracting and grant opportunities. I want to give you all the caveat. When the board passed ARP, when they passed their allocation plan, their spending plan, they did so with the intent not to create a whole bunch of contracting and grant opportunities. So I just want to be really, really clear. It was really done with the intent to get dollars out to the community. So what you'll see in a lot of the ARP, a lot of the sort of ARP approved programs is you'll see, money go out for rent relief. Money's going out for housing relief, right? You see support for direct payments to landlords to make sure that they, can be made whole, right? We have emergency, response costs, right? So you actually see a strong push for services in this initial round of spending, which we call tranche 1. And those services are intended to meet the needs of CBOs, nonprofits. So there are more grant related opportunities than there are contracting opportunities, but that does not mean that there aren't contracting opportunities through ARP. And in fact, one of the things that we've aimed to do is reduce barriers to contracting so that CBOs and small businesses can help provide essential services for communities that are most impacted by the pandemic by engaging in this competitive procurement and contracting process. What this process looks like is here on this timeline, right? We have the solicitation that's publicly released, proposals are submitted, there's an evaluation, a protest period, and then the contract execution. Again, goes from a total of 2 to 3 months, goes from a total of 4 to 10 months down to 2 to 3 months. The team has looked at things like providing streamlined templates for our departments, examining prompt payment systems, as well as advanced payment opportunities as well. Now, when it comes to understanding what we're aiming to do with regards to ARP and making sure that you all are informed of and have access to these opportunities, we're engaging in this countywide outreach effort. So our goal, and again, the reason why I'm here today, our goal is to make sure that you all are aware of both programming opportunities, but also the contracting, subcontracting, and grant opportunities. Through our ARP website, you can access that information. Again, by focusing on equity, the goal is to invest in communities that have been historically excluded and or have experienced inequitable outcomes, and also those that are hardest hit by the pandemic. And so you will see us roll out, and we've already begun to do some of this, but a social media campaign, a shareable digital toolkit, translated outreach materials. We're currently translating in at least 8 different languages, including Thai, Spanish, Tagalog, and others. Based upon the types of translators that we have access to. We're providing print materials and mailers, and we're going to have targeted hyper-ethnic local media outreach occurring as well. We are reaching out to, in partnership with the Economic Workforce Development Department, the new department that's coming out of the Workforce Development, Aging, and Community Services Department. We're outreaching to chambers of commerce, again, to community-based organizations, coalitions, and collaboratives, and to small businesses throughout the county, so that they are aware of, you all are aware of these contracting opportunities. You heard Michael talk about doing business with LA County. What we did not do is we did not replicate the DBW website. So you still want to go to the Doing Business with LA County website, as he pointed out earlier. That's where you're going to learn about solicitations and contracts countywide. You just heard him talk more broadly about all the opportunities that exist. That's where master agreements for commodities and services are posted. So still go to the Doing Business with LA County website. ARP does not replace that website, okay? We actually link directly to that website because we want to make sure that you are able to learn more about and sign up as a vendor for the county so that you can provide these services. But what you will be able to see on the ARP website is a list of ARP specific and also Care First Community Investment specific contracting opportunities, grant opportunities, and master agreements. And so Kathy Hanks, who's here today, is a part of an internal team that's working with County Council and working with our unit to help create a set of create a master agreement with work order solicitations that are ARP compliant for services such as data and evaluation, programming, community engagement, and outreach. So when that master agreement list, when those work order solicitations are released, departments countywide will be able to post them to the ARP website, and you'll be able to contract or at least pursue an opportunity to contract directly with those departments or with CEO or with other agencies to help provide services in support of the American Rescue Plan. So this is a little bit different in that we are streamlining countywide contracting opportunities in specific areas for and on behalf of our departments who all need similar services across their programs. Again, you can go to the ceo.lacounty.gov/recovery/contract-opportunities website to learn more. Click on the interest form. Make sure you sign up and get your name added to the interest form, because that's where you're going to get an email with these details. And then if you want to learn more about the American Rescue Plan, you can also go to that site and click on these links. You can explore the data, you can check out the reports, etc. You heard Michael talk about it, but you can, again, just as re-emphasizing here, there's a list of solicitations. They come up through a feed. So you'll be able to see when those solicitations are made available. So if you ever just want to go check it out, you can see it there. And then you can download that dictionary of terms so that you know exactly what it is that we mean when we say, contract amendment or whatever the case may be. Again, there you have it. You saw this earlier. I'll just reemphasize it. But at this time, what is important for you all to note is that we are partnering with philanthropy, who is working to invest in a technical assistance pool so that they can increase the number of potential vendors who can receive both support for our compliance and reporting requirements, but also know how to sign up for contracting opportunities with the county. And as I mentioned earlier, we're releasing this new RFSQ so that you all can take advantage of an opportunity to contract with the county as well. Again, we're going to be providing these set of common services such as needed language translation, interpretation services, evaluation. Kathy is really good at telling me language translation is it's a good, it's not a service, but language interpretation is a service. And so you can sign up for providing evaluation, technical consulting, third-party administrator, and training services as well, amongst others. So with that being said, let me just pause there. Again, I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here with you today, and I'm happy to go ahead and pause and take any questions you all may have.
Well, thanks, Dart. I'm going to jump in with the first one and then leave room for any of you that have other questions. But the one thing that, we talked about when we started this work 2 years ago was success should be communities doing better, county residents doing better, right? Not just nonprofits having more funding or county systems being more efficient. And one of the sort of benchmarks that you focused on is kind of what should change in 10 years. Do you want to talk about that a bit? Because that's different.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Regina. So in the ARDI initiative, the Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative, we are currently putting together a countywide racial equity strategic plan. And in that countywide racial equity strategic plan, we've identified the areas in LA County throughout our region where we face the greatest racial disparities. And we've identified those primary areas as being. I'm gonna see if I can pull it up for you all here just quickly to help answer that question, because I think it'll just be easier if for you visually to see it. We've identified 5 primary, what we call our life course outcomes, and these life course outcomes are the areas where we see the greatest disparities amongst our populations here. So, for example, in infant maternal health and mortality, and the number of adults that are facing first-time felony convictions, the number of children in our families who are dealing with poverty, and so increasing their income to at least 250% above the federal poverty level, providing educational attainment, and things like stable full-time employment. You might be asking, well, why isn't housing and homelessness on here? Housing and homelessness are essentially captured through what we call our contributing factors. These are things that need to happen in order to improve these life course outcomes. For those of you who may not be familiar with life course theory, life course outcomes are institutionally defined milestones that keep our lives on track. They are the reasons why we were able to sit here today. And so what we are examining right now, and what we've examined, is the data to determine which life course outcomes are most important for us to focus on over the next 10 years. So when people ask me, how will you know that we've been successful? How will you know that Artie's done its job? How do you know that the county has done its job? I'll say we've done our job when you see racial disparities close. You will know that we've done our job when you see a decrease in adult time felony convictions. You will know that we've done our job when you see an increase in incomes for family, because we know that poverty is a driver for homelessness. So if you increase people's income, or we work to increase their income, and not just prevent negative life outcomes, right? It's not just about stopping bad things from happening. This is about investing in people's ability to thrive. This is about being generative. So the idea here is that we want to focus on helping people do well in LA County. And as a result, they may not need our services as much, right? We won't have to just focus on people falling through the safety net or catching them when they do, which we still need to have. We can focus on investing in their ability to thrive and do well. So that's the framework that we have within ARTI. And so we intend to examine over the next 10 years the types of outcomes we want to achieve, track those outcomes, and then improve them over time. Since Emmy is here and she's working on the countywide strategic plan, I would add that this racial equity strategic plan will serve as sort of the preamble. It's going to be integrated into the county strategic plan. And we'll be able to rely upon and work with our departments to help carry out the activities that are that we're currently working to identify, or the strategies we've currently identified and are working to vet in the community, so that we can ultimately drive change countywide. So I'm happy to come back at a later day. I know we're currently doing CBO outreach sessions to talk more about this, to get your feedback, to engage you. Some of you have already been here. Wilma, I see you're here. Benjamin has been on one of the sessions, I believe. And so some of you have already been engaged and involved in the conversations that we're now facilitating through ARTI. But I would certainly invite you all to be engaged and be involved as we continue to flesh out what this strategic plan is going to look like over time. So I know that's a long response, a long answer, but I feel like I had to give you a little bit of context to help speak to what Regina asked.
Well, thanks, Dart. It looks like Sierra has a question, and I'm hoping what you all see is that when we asked the question 2 years ago about what matters to the nonprofit sector to get to economic recovery for county residents, some of what you asked about is starting to show up in some of the program changes that are happening. So Sierra, did you have a question for Dr. Scorza?
Hi, I do. Hello, Dr. Scorza. It's great to see all the work that you're doing. I'm delighted you're in this position. I have a question about once the contracts are obtained. So Open Paths Counseling Center, as you know well, provides psychotherapy, culturally affirmative psychotherapy to clients who don't traditionally have access. And we were actually contracting with the Women's Reentry Program through DMH. And the challenge that we found, and a lot of the reason why I joined today's webinar, was to determine whether we should continue to contract with the county, because the challenge we ran into is that when the ladies that were being worked with through the reentry program did not show up for services, we did not get paid, even though we held up everything on our end. Our clinicians were there, the groups were ready, everything was happening. But because of some of the challenges that the ladies were facing and some of the internal challenges that the county was facing with navigating the technology for the ladies and getting them ready, that we ended up at a deficit because we couldn't bill for services if there were less than 2 participants. So even though everything was done on our end, we ended up taking quite a financial hit. And then those were other people who weren't able to be served by those therapists during those times. So I'm curious about if this is a challenge that other CBOs are facing, where once you have the contract, there's limitations to being able to do it. If there's something that falls down in the delivery of services on the county's end, even when we're holding up our end. Thank you.
Sierra, I will just tell you that it is a growing conversation on the nonprofit side, whether we can afford to partner with the county because of the examples that you just used. It's at the core of some of the work going forward that the equity and county contracting team is going to focus on. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm great to hear that it's on the radar and that it's not just our organization, because it was really frustrating with our limited budget to not be able to bill when we did everything on our side.
Yep.
Well, Sierra, I really appreciate you lifting that up. And for those of you who don't know, Sierra actually partnered with my organization, the Social Justice Learning Institute, when I led it and founded it in Inglewood, and we were able to provide mental health services for our young men of color, especially those who had been formerly incarcerated or transitioned out of the juvenile justice system. And so I can personally attest to the value of the work that her organization, Open Paths, has done. And so, you know, with that being said, I want to acknowledge that one of the efforts that I engaged in, I think Claire Knowlton is here as well, was a focus on understanding, you know, our full costs, right, in the nonprofit sector. That often it's not, you know, it's not always clear how in partnership with the county, the full costs associated with our activities will be covered, right? So I think that there's an opportunity, not only as you have lifted up, and I'm sure Emmy here can speak to this, I think there's an opportunity to elevate that conversation and to think strategically about what it will take to ensure that our nonprofit sector is whole in partnership with the county, but also to make sure that those types of issues are made known, that they are thought about as we, you know, consider, you know, for example, how we can better strengthen the delivery of services in the American Rescue Plan Act as well. So as I hear those things, just note, for example, that when I'm talking to departments and we're engaging in program designs, these are questions that I'm also able to ask and raise. And these are things that we're able to examine so that departments are thinking about how they can maintain equity in their contracting as well. So I want you all to know that you know, it's not limited to there are multiple ways by which we are able to examine these issues and work with county departments and county agencies. As Michael pointed out, the county contracting is typically decentralized on the services side, not on the procurement side. And as a result, you know, you have 37 opportunities to do it very differently. So with what Emmy and her team are doing is they're trying to help make it better. And I think with all of you, we're trying to make it better. And so I again, thank you for lifting that up and would encourage you to continue to do so, but just note that it's not falling on deaf ears. So that I think that's ultimately the point.
So Sierra, you're going to get an invitation by the end of this meeting to be part of some of the conversations that the Equity and Contracting Group is focused on, and we definitely want to open up to all of you an invitation that if these are areas that you want to put time into, we need content experts that can help influence the choices that the county staff is making. So I know, Dr. Scorza, people would love to ask you questions for the next hour, but we're also going to use some of this time to get some feedback from our colleagues on, are we on the right track? Is there anything that we missed? As we've been working on this partnership with the county executive team, wanted to check in with them. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing and for the really exciting future that I think is coming for all of us to work better together. So thank you. I wanted to let you guys know almost to the day today, we here in California faced the first stay-at-home order. Immediately after that, Supervisors Barger and Solis formed an economic resiliency task force asking different industries for what it would take to recover from the pandemic. We, the group that you see here, since that time have been meeting. We used that, the first assignment was to create a set of recommendations about what it would take for our sector to recover. What we said is that it is not about the pandemic, that this is a pre-existing condition, that some of the issues that the nonprofit organizations are facing flies in the face of really the economic recovery goals that the county was starting to talk about. We felt that this was important enough that once we turned in our set of recommendations, that we kept talking to the county about what our nonprofit colleagues said they needed. So to create greater impact and reach, we wanted to make sure that we focused on three things: to ensure that resources were getting to those that needed the support most, that we streamlined the county contracting, what they call procurement, and auditing processes that we knew were inefficient and had some real lost opportunities in there. They were expensive for us, they were confusing and time wasting for everyone involved, and they were just out of date. And then lastly, to talk about reimbursement and what it actually costs. Now, Emmy remembers, and I know Jason remembers, that when we first asked this question, what we heard from some county executives is the nonprofits don't care about this. So we asked the question, are these the right issues? And we had over 400 organizations tell us absolutely. We also had 45 funders that said, right now we're kind of in this perfect storm where we're funding the gap rather than innovation. And that in order for the county to really talk about economic recovery and nonprofit resilience, we had to talk about this business model, or at least change some of the practices. We were encouraged that not only when we talked to the supervisors about our recommendations and their deputies, that pretty quickly there was a streamlining motion that said we agree. And that then a few months later, the equity and contracting motion happened. And then a few months later, what became D'Artagnan's team emerged. But in the midst of it, the CEO's office attached some senior smart people to it, which is part of the group that you see right there, that really demonstrated to us that they were committing to listen to what the nonprofit voices had to say and see where we could learn together about what we could attack. So after the letter of support, after the focus groups, once we started meeting and discovering that in some cases departments were saying, we didn't know you cared about that, or we didn't know we even do that anymore, or you don't understand, it's decentralized, we can't change it. There were some themes that started to emerge that once, and Emmy and Jason spent a lot of time creating a structure that became 4 action teams. The 4 action teams by design had 50 nonprofit organizations and 50 county executives at the table working on these 4 kind of groupings of issues. We started meeting last August. These groups meet aside from their regular jobs in the midst of a pandemic, to work on something that we all believe is really important for some transformational change, but greater impact to put county dollars into communities that need them. So the 4 groups focused on access, technical assistance, capacity building. The contracting nuts and bolts was a lot of what we talked about before. How those contracts are, how people find out about them, how we get reimbursed, what it takes to fulfill the requirements. Data and metrics was to really understand baseline. What communities are receiving the dollars, what organizations are getting the contracting opportunities, how much of a delay, what the reimbursement rate looks like, what happens to cash flow. And then the last thing, which was, how do we create and track progress against goals? And some of the issues that happened around, where can we centralize? Where do we have discretion? What's happening with indirect costs, and where we're bound by federal issues or state issues, or where there's discretion locally, where they could update the auditor controller handbook, which was supposed to be a guide, and how we could make this whole process easier and more effective for everyone. So as you would imagine, that opens up a lot of questions. And I can tell you, it's been really impressive that we've had an opportunity to kind of change the relationship, to start to talk as partners, not just vendors. On the nonprofit side, we could hear what was happening and what gets in the way for the county teams. And then on the county side, what really mattered to the nonprofits and why. So we're really excited to finally be able to feel like we're starting to get to what the meaningful changes might look like. So hot off the press this week, those 4 action teams have morphed into 3 work groups as we figured out sort of what the problems were we wanted to solve and what strategies were going to be most relevant, short-term, long-term, what success would look like, and what it was going to take to figure that out. It became 3 groups now. So focused on the reimbursement piece and compensation, equity and access, and then the training technical assistance side. So with that in mind, what we wanted to do with the time that we have left is we have people that have been part of the action teams, part of the working groups, spending a lot of time over the last 2 years, really trying to figure out where we can drive change that's most impactful. What we wanted to do with the time that we have left is to hear from you, to make sure that, are we on the right track? Are the things that we're asking for meaningful for you? Is there anything that we missed? So our co-leads are going to be in the room with some of our CNM staff to make sure that we can take notes. And then we really need to make sure that we call out that Kathy and Emmy and Jason have been willing partners in listening sometimes to hard things, and to put up with some of the questions that we've been having about what will it take to make these changes happen? And then where can we be helpful as an outside agitator and supporter and partner to let the supervisors know where they need financial support, or where they need staffing support, or where they need attention that can actually help drive these changes. So we have this really unique position at the moment where the CEO's office has been extraordinarily supportive, that the executive staff across really 6 departments have rolled up their sleeves and gotten involved. And I know that some of you are skeptical, if you've been working with the county for a while, that it's hard to believe that change is possible. But we hope that what you saw with Michael and the work that his team's been doing, and the work that D'Artagnan and his team is doing, reflects that we are working with government, and we are working with a very complicated culture and a system, but that they're moving in a direction that we ask them to move. So with that, we want to check in with you. So I'm going to stop talking, and Anna's going to move into set up the breakout groups. You can choose which group and which topic is most important to you. And we'll take about 10 minutes to get some feedback from you. We'll come back together and make sure that there's a couple of action items that we want to ask of you before we let you go. So Anna, I'm turning it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Regina. In just a few seconds, you all will see an option at the bottom tab of your screen to join a breakout room. It is divided into 4 different topics, so feel free to hover over the room that you're interested in and click join. So I'll open that up now.
So welcome back, everybody. So you guys should know by now that Winnie Wexler and Joe St. John and Elizabeth Berger have been putting tons of time into this as co-leads. And I'm curious from our co-leads, what did we hear from our colleagues? Elizabeth, curious what you heard.
it's hard to understand where to go. And then when you get there, it's hard to understand what's being expected. And please make it easier to find it and to navigate it once you get there.
There we go. That sounds familiar. Joe, what did you hear from the groups?
Yeah, similarly, let us know what we're getting into, how to get into it, everything that's going to be involved for us to be successful and to get paid.
There you go. All right. And Winnie, what did you hear from your group?
Please give us explicit goals and expectations so that we know exactly what it is that we're being expected to do. Please make this into an ongoing feedback loop. So as we continue to improve, new ideas are included in the process so that this isn't just like a one-time thing. And please make sure that the redundancy between monitoring, auditing, contract development is addressed, because it's just such a waste of administrative time.
Well, this is all really valuable. I can tell you on the group that I was in, we were talking about, how to be honest about what it's going to take to get smaller organizations able to contract, and some of the requirements around insurance and other that's emerging. We know the costs for that are a barrier. You guys should know that these are all on the list. So there's two things that I promised I was going to ask you. One is that if you're interested in being involved in the ECC teams, those working groups for now meet every 2 weeks, and it is getting into the details of figuring out solutions. If you want to be part of that, please email Anna and let her know which group you're interested in, and we'll make sure that the ECC team gets you on that distribution list. The other thing, as you have opportunities over the next few months and weeks, the Board of Supervisors cares right now what you think about what it's going to take to deliver services to their communities. We've just been through a redistricting process. So your voices about what matters to the community and what matters for your nonprofit to be able to be impactful, please let them know that these issues matter if you have a chance to talk to them. We tell them that you care about this, but it never hurts when they hear from you. And that we also are really grateful for the partnership, the real partnership that's been born thanks to the CEO's support and the hard work with Emmy and Jason and Kathy and all the county executives that put in the time. We also wanted to let you know that next week, we're going to have an event for the city to talk to you about what they're doing around contracting. And they also wanted to talk to you about how to influence the budget process right now. So if you're interested, that happens on the 22nd. So I know we're a minute over, so I'm going to let you all go because I know you have plenty of other things to do. But thank you so much. This has been really, really helpful to us. And please just let us know if there's anything that we left out. Please put it in the chat. You can always email me. You can absolutely email Anna. She's way better organized. And our co-leads are always interested in hearing from you. And we will keep you posted on progress. So thank you so much.